Welcome to the Formicary from SciAnts Media, SciAnts Conversations. I'm Belen Cacho, an ant geneticist and science communicator. Our mission at SciAnts is to make science more accessible and enjoyable through interviews with scientists of all kinds from all around the world. We want to rekindle or spark a new love for science inside you. All you need is curiosity. In honor of Women's History Month, we are celebrating women in STEM. We will be interviewing amazing women in STEM or with STEM backgrounds, whether they are content creators, professors, or active researchers. Along with the interview series for the entire month of March, we are raising money for Girls Who Code. Together, we can help close the gender gap in technology fields. Please find the donation link in the show notes. Today, we are talking to TinyToxicTofu, a science communicator on Twitch, YouTube, and Instagram. All of her socials will be linked in the show notes. Now let's get to it. Dr. Tofu, thank you so much for joining us for our Women in STEM month. And you're the first one on the first day of the month and kicking it off with a streamer that I look up to immensely. She is a real life physicist, doctor, PhD in physics, partnered Twitch streamer. Welcome onto the show, Dr. Tiny Toxic Tofu.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really happy to be here.
Would you mind giving a quick intro?
Yes, absolutely. I am from Ireland. I have a bachelor's in physics and chemistry education. Went into a bit of teaching, decided I didn't really like kids. So I quickly switched route. I did an applied physics master's degree, went on to do a PhD in batteries and the Irish electric grid. And now I am a full-time lecturer here in Ireland, which is incredible to be able to become a lecturer immediately after graduation. I got very, very lucky. But I'm also an avid science communicator via Instagram and Twitch. So I teach physics mostly to people who are just getting curious about physics. So do you know the way there's amazing YouTube channels like Veritasium and Kurzgesagt, and they teach like very fluffy physics, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like with all the wonderful space launches that are happening, everyone's getting really excited. And basically, I'm your introduction of if you actually want to start learning basic physics, then I start doing that kind of stuff. That's my shtick, if that makes sense.
So just a generic question for you. Why do you think it's important for many people to learn about physics? Like, what does the everyday person, why is it beneficial and enriching to the everyday person's life to learn some physics?
That's a really good question. I would say that generally speaking, that y'all are doing physics without realizing it. I think that is something that kind of has to be accepted. Physics is in every bit and ounce of your life, no matter what field of science you do. So yes, biologists are physicists at heart somewhere deep inside, but also like just living your life and everything that you do, whether it be repairing anything at home or building things, working at your PC, in some shape, way, or form. Everything can be led back down to the creation of a physicist, number one, and number two, your leading of the understanding of that realm also leads back to physics.
Bart Hackey suggests the possibility of sports as well involved.
Yeah,
in physics.
Absolutely. So, I love teaching rugby. Rugby is a huge sport here in Ireland. We're one of the greatest rugby nations in the world, which is a rare thing to say for such a small island. But I love teaching the physics of rugby, whether it be the momentum of the players. Some of the collisions are insane. And the way they pass the rugby ball, which is very similar to American football. So the physics would apply very much similarly.
So one really cool thing that I love about your channel is how you teach the physics, right? So like you said, that teaching in the context of rugby is a way to make it accessible. What are some other ways that you also teach physics on stream and maybe even in the classroom that make it easier to connect with?
So the thing that I do on Twitch is that usually the physics that I teach is inspired by the game I'm playing. So I'll actually be on the front page next weekend, just after International Women's Day, and I'll be teaching Marie Sklodowska-Curie's work on radiation, but it will be leading into Half-Life. So if anyone knows Steam's and Valve's famous game series, so hopefully we'll know everything about the physics of Half-Life before actually playing Half-Life. And that's the way I tend to do it. I try and find interesting and fun topics in video games to teach people. And as Zir has pointed out in the chat, I upload videos of me doing weird mathematics and weird physics moments in games where it was an accident. I killed a character. It wasn't on purpose, but we calculated his centripetal force uh, in rotation, and we measured his launch velocity. You do all these like little fun physics stuff in the games.
And are you going to be looking at I think the crowbar, right, is one of the main weapons in Half-Life. Are you going to be looking at any of the physics of how to like get into some of those doors?
No, I didn't even think about that. I Yeah. The crowbar was very significant in Half-Life. I didn't even think about that. No, I was mostly looking at the fact that, Half-Life have the lambda in their user
Yep.
in the title, but that lambda isn't Half-Life. Half-Life is t to the minus half, so it's, yeah.
See,
I'm
y'all,
a
we're gonna find
sourpuss.
out some physics in Half-Life. The other one I really enjoy you playing is God of War.
Yeah, that was fun.
And
I didn't do much physics there.
but there was still some. You were yeeting some enemies, right? And you were calculating like the velocity of where they were going and how it was trying to be
Mm,
connected. It's a really clever way of making physics accessible. And
yeah.
before we get into how you personally got into physics, what got you into science communication? What got you into the idea that, you know what, this is
Oh.
important for people to know of and make accessible to? What was it?
Yeah, that is very interesting because I was a Twitch streamer for a very long time. I used to play, I want to say semi-professionally. It's not really semi-professional, but a different game called Heroes of the Storm. It's a MOBA. If there's any Blizzard fans in the chat, they know what I'm talking about. I used to be a Diablo OTP, played him as a tank, and I used to stream for years that game competitively. And then I abandoned the game. There was bad blood, not with anyone, just like the game itself. It's very toxic, and you can imagine a negative community can build up if you play any MOBA. And I started streaming variety games, but in the process, I realized that everyone has to have a shtick, if that makes sense, a selling point when you're a Twitch streamer. I didn't know what I could provide. I didn't know what I was unique at. And it just happened to be that we were discussing Alan Turing. I pulled out Alan Turing's paper. We sat down as a stream, read it together. And yeah, that's how that little ball started rolling, that so many people were chatting and communicating about Alan Turing's paper. And after that, it twisted into physics.
What is the paper about?
Oh, it's the imitation game. So it's the infamous paper that he wrote, absolutely ahead of his time, where he talks about how a computer could pass a test where it could falsify itself as a person, as in could pass itself as a human being.
That is really cool. And so, how long ago was it that you started changing the stream type into one of these much
Mm.
more like educational based, like looking into those papers and like making everything a slant that maybe not necessarily even about physics at first? Like, how did it become that what it is today?
Just I suppose started it almost 2 years ago. It was towards the end of my PhD, and it's actually how the Instagram thing happened. I never posted an educational thing on Instagram about my physics. I published my thesis. I finished writing my PhD thesis. I had a few weeks break. I went to watch Oppenheimer in the cinema, and there was just a really cool moment that happened. No spoilers, but there was an atomic bomb test, okay? FYI, in case anyone doesn't know about this. And there's a wonderful scene where just before the test happens, Feynman is sitting behind the screen of his Jeep. And people are saying, "Oh, you should put on your glasses." And he says, "Oh, don't worry, I don't need to. The windshield will protect me." And the idea behind it is that UV doesn't penetrate glass. That whole principle is the basis of why, if you do any spectroscopy analysis to get into the UV spectrum, you can't use glass. You actually need to use quartz. There's other little materials that you can use. Anyways, I did a whole little spiel on Instagram. It kind of blew up, and that's how I was like, oh wow, people are actually interested to learn about science, about physics in everyday life. So that's how that rolled as well.
And then you were able to transition that to Twitch because like that's a different type of media too, right?
Mm.
That live interaction where you can go for hours. Did you find the transition from like that Instagram post to being a live interactive audience that used to is just to the gaming side of things? Was that a hard transition?
I don't think so. I think because I was streaming for a while anyway, just to kind of put it in perspective, Twitch is a casual conversation. I can make a few jokes, I can swear a little bit, I'll hold off swearing while we're on the front page. I can have a bit of banter with my friends and my community, while the Instagram or TikTok or Shorts, whatever it is you're doing, is more polished. So it is, you have kind of almost a script prepared, if that makes sense.
Right. And so it was pretty quickly accepted by the community, I imagine.
Yeah, well, it actually works wonderfully, especially now that I'm a physics lecturer. I cover a topic in physics lecture, or I want to cover a topic in physics lecturing. I bring it to Twitch. We talk about it for an hour or 2 hours. For example, the other day we talked about Ernst Rutherford, one of the coolest applied physicists to have ever exist. I can talk about him nonstop. But I would talk about it on Twitch. We would have a rant. I have an idea of what I could do. I would go after the Twitch stream, write a script a bit more polished of what I would actually say about Rutherford, and then upload it on Instagram. And then, as a physics lecturer, I'll bring it up to my students, and I have loads of stories to tell them as I'm teaching them, for example, atomic physics.
That is really cool. It's almost like you're you got a whole like guinea pig crew, right? Of like, well, I guess
Yeah.
lab rats as they're known, right?
Exactly. My community are called lab rats for the exact for that exact reason.
So, Dr. Tofu, take us back. What got you originally interested in science, and was it physics to start with?
I actually unfortunately don't have an inspirational story. I was just good at maths in school. And you in Ireland we have the system kind of similar to the US, where you have middle school and high school, where we transition from junior cert to leaving cert, and we have to pick a few subjects to specialize in. And I selected four subjects actually, which was really rare. You were only supposed to do three, but I chose biology, chemistry, physics. I did all three,
Nice.
and then I took an extra fourth one, applied mathematics, which was really really helpful. Very good subject for later in life. I did all three subjects. I got a taste of all three sciences, and when it came to going to college, I still didn't know what to do. I was good at maths. I liked physics. It was grand. I kind of mostly applied for the secondary school teaching course because, um, just to kind of give a bit more background and information, that even though I'm from Ireland, my parents actually immigrated in the 90s, and we weren't very well off. And so when I was looking at university degrees, the education is not technically free, but it is free in Ireland, as in it is affordable. But I knew that I needed to be employed. So I was looking for a job with employability, and there was a shortage of physics teachers in Ireland at the time. Honestly, that's the reason why I picked it. I thought about getting employed as quickly as possible and having a stable income so that, I wasn't a burden on my family.
And so, in that line of education, what parlayed you into getting a physics PhD?
So the master's was the first turn. I had to do the master's first, but it was actually my thermodynamics lecturer, absolutely amazing lecturer. He was so passionate about physics, and if you speak to physicists or scientists, it's not thermodynamics that makes you a physicist. Usually, it's particle physics, quantum, those kind of things. Thermodynamics is the thing that everyone survives. But he was so enthusiastic and so passionate about his subject. He made me fall in love with thermodynamics as well, which led me on to apply for a master's degree. I got a scholarship that was incredible. I couldn't believe that I applied for it and got it, which then, because of my good grades, I was able to get really ease in comfortably into a PhD program. And that's how it happened here. It was almost accidental. I like to describe that my whole course of getting my PhD and being a physics lecturer to this day is a series of unfortunate events, if anyone knows the books.
Yeah.
It just happened in a way that none of this was planned. Life was hard at the time. There we go.
It Looking back on it, did you make the right decision?
Oh,
You're
absolutely.
happy with the physics that you've chosen over the biology and the chemistry that you also had?
Oh, yeah, I wasn't very good at biology. It was interesting, it was very good, but, in comparison to physics and applied maths, I struggled with a lot of the learning material. I have very bad memory to the point that it's really bad in physics. I never know the scientists' names, I never know the experimental procedures, I'm not very good at remembering things. You might notice during the stream, I might forget words. It will happen eventually. And not that, all of, I don't want that negative kind of aspect about biology where it's all about learning off. But in comparison to, let's say, an exam, a physics exam and a biology exam at a secondary school and college level, we'll say, um, I would say you could figure out more in physics in the moment, on the spot,
So
mathematically at least.
is it more that it's learning a lot of the processes and the
Words.
applied application in the physics, right? Of like how you can build
Yeah,
and get to
yeah,
the
yeah,
answer
yeah.
versus just like here is this pathway that I need to memorize back.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, the biology, it was again I'm sure y'all have weird words, and they're very, very big. And listen, what we could simplify a lot of these names down, but yeah. So that was my biggest thing. But with physics, yeah, there was definitions, yeah, there was something, but because of the mathematical process, in the moment, in the heat of the moment of the exam pressure, you could figure out most of the problems, if that makes sense.
When so being in physics and going into the program, what does a master's program look like? Is that something where you're also working in a lab? What is a physics lab?
Yeah.
Like, what does that even look like? Because we know we talk here about the biological lab and a wet lab
Mm.
or even a computer lab. As a physicist, I feel like there's two possibilities that people might think of. One is that you're dropping an apple, right? And thinking about what that means. And the other is you're
Core
working
Newton.
with like nuclear bombs.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do neither. Yes, yes. So my master's and my PhD were both in a lab. A lot of it was laboratory based. Specifically, my degree was in applied physics. If you've watched Big Bang Theory,
Mhm.
there's basically two sides of the coin. There's the theoretical physicist, which is Sheldon, and there's the experimental physicist, which is Leonard. I would be the Leonard if you want to kind of um, have something in your mind. And so honestly, a physics laboratory is basically a chemistry lab but with no rules. And I know that sounds almost bad, but imagine that you have loads of experience in this, and you know that in biology there's a huge safety procedure in anything. Like you said, wet lab, dry lab. There's different rules and certain legal procedures. In chemistry, there's all the chemicals. In physics, like you said, unless you're working in nuclear, nothing is usually dangerous. So there's no lab coats usually. There's no scary like supervision processes involved. There's obviously the general health and safety, of course. But yeah, I always kind of describe the physicists are chemists on the loose. That no one is looking over your shoulder to make sure you're not going to do something silly or dangerous. But yeah, I would describe it very similar to a chemistry lab, but also a bit more. What's the word? Hands buildy. Like most of the things that we build in the lab is very crudely done. I had a very simple experiment where I needed to keep vanadium, it's an element I worked with, at a certain temperature, and I needed to keep it floating or whatever. Literally, we bought a plastic box, we massive plastic box. We rigged a kettle to work with an American transformer at a lower voltage so that it would slowly boil kettles. We bought this little Tiki Max thing pump that would pump water from the kettle back into the bucket. And what else did we do? Oh yeah, we had thermocouples to equilibrate the temperature. It was so crudely done, but it was so ingenious as well. Do you know what I mean? It was so simple
So
that you
you're
couldn't
the modern
argue
day
with it.
MacGyver, right? So like you're
But you know what? You know what? That's not far from the truth.
right, you're coming up with innovative ways to get to the answer, right? By building custom things. So did the lab just look like, I don't know, someone's cool garage with just like a better quality
Yeah.
toys?
Well, I wouldn't say it's better quality still. Yeah, it was physics department is not very well funded. on a budget in weird ways. Yeah, but it was a mess, as in it's absolutely cluttered. And we had access to some of the really cool old equipment, really old classical potentiostats, little things like that that nobody would really use nowadays, especially in any advanced lab.
Hmm.
But if your experiment is very, I don't mean this in an insulting way when I say primitive, but if your experiment is very, very basic, number one, it's simple and easy to fund and all of that. But number two, your results cannot be argued. If you're an experimental physicist, you do not want to publish results that are arguable, that someone can deny or falsify in any way. So if your experiment is as basic as it gets, down to the basic principles, you have a very good experiment and very good publications.
So would you, like, with your experience in biology and chemistry, would you say that's
Mhm.
any different than those background fields, really, of just like having something simple, it works in a particular way, it's reproducible, that's what makes for a good scientific paper? Or is there something a little bit more niche in experimental physics? Like, are your reviewers and your critique, the people critiquing your work, are they also on the mathematical and theoretical side of things? So do you have to be kind of double balancing your work against a, almost two fields worth of research instead of one?
Mm. It's funny that you mention it. My publications are actually not in physics. They happen to be in electrochemistry just because of the papers that I have published have been on vanadium batteries. And so we published to the Electrochemical Society. My experience with them has been really, really good. I think I don't know if I should say I have it easy. That's not fair to say. But the research group that I was part of are very, very well embedded in the electrochemistry community. They're very well known and very well respected. So the idea behind it is that if we're publishing paper, it's already a very well polished paper. Now that sounds like, oh, I have it easy. Actually, what happens is before we ever get to the publication aspect, before the reviewers look at our papers, I'm absolutely crucified. I get brought to tears about the criticism that's on those papers before it even reaches the reviewers. So in a weird sense, I still do the same process as everyone else, despite the fact that my research group is actually, very well known in the electrochemistry community.
So it's still not any kind of straightforward push. It's still like very heavily
No.
critiqued, very easily or needed to be easily reproduced, right? So that you have the best possible like reliability
Yeah.
outcome. When you started your masters, how did you choose your research question? Because and you can tell me if I'm like mistaken here, but in biology, it's like, oh, I'm just looking at something. It's like, well, how does that work? And it's like, I see an animal moving, and I'm wondering like how it does its wiggling. In physics, right? Like, how did you pick your question? Like, how did you think of this is interesting, and this is what I want to spend the next couple of years asking questions about?
Yeah, if we see something wiggling, we slap it. It's like, nope, stop wiggling. You're not meant to wiggle. No, 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 don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. So in physics, no, we're very, very peculiar. Like, it's definitely a thing where you have a research group. They have an idea for an experiment. They ask you to do the experiment, and then they'll see stuff happen, and they're like, interesting. What if we like what's the consequences of that? And you just branch off. It's basically like a Twitch streamer that goes on a tangent. I'm totally not speaking from experience, but do you know the way a streamer's topic can derail over time?
You mean the rabbit
As
holes like we have here, where it's like you're like, we're gonna talk about octopi today. Oh God, we ended up in microRNAs in a frog, like totally unrelated.
Absolutely. So, yeah, that is basically how research is done in my well, was done in my group anyway. And I don't know if it's physics as a whole, but that is definitely something that happens. A PhD is usually a tangent, and I don't know if anyone else writes their PhD thesis that way, but I ended up writing my PhD thesis that way, where you have to craft a story afterwards, and you do need to link your tangents together. So, the old school classical way of the way a PhD is done is that you have a thesis with something like 3 original chapters. Most people do by publication now. I did it the very old school way here. And you have to craft a story as to where chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3 link up. And then there is this big kind of conclusion or aha, look what I've done moment. There's always that one chapter that is a disaster, I think is a fair thing to say to many people. There's one chapter there like, "Ugh, that we just put that in because of the story. We needed to put it in there just to make sense."
So what was the story of your master's and your PhD work?
Yeah. We could talk for a while here if that's okay.
Please, please.
I've
That's why we're
prepared
here.
for this. My master's was actually in something a bit very minute. It was in a field of nanotechnology where we were actually looking at the electro deposition of copper, depositing copper on thin films using electricity, electro deposition. And why this is important is basically if you look at your PCs, everyone turn right, turn left, wherever your beautiful PC is, and you see your motherboard. If you have a glass, a glass overview. Don't touch your PC if it's running now. It's hot. Don't touch it. But in the motherboard, you have all these integrated lines, all these deposited metallic lines. And I was basically studying that as you deposit copper over and over again on top of each other, grains form, literally like circles begin to form. And not only that, depending on the rate that you deposit, depending on temperature, depending on all of these things, they would cause stress or strain. Now, why this is really important to study is because over time, your integrated circuits will fall apart, they will cripple. And basically, I was studying and observing this under a scanning electron microscope. And yeah, it's really important not only in integrated circuits and nanotechnology and semiconductors, it's also important in battery technology and any. You can imagine the application of this is very, very universal.
So you're looking
Then,
at a
oh,
scanning electron microscope is what you're taking
mm,
these images under, that's kind of cool. So we've talked about in the context of biology, it's really neat to then see it in a totally different field, still being utilized to be able to see the details. Like when you're looking at that image, what are you looking for to be able to tell you when something's happening or it's not the case?
no, like it's not even that we were looking for something. We were just looking at what it was.
Cool.
It wasn't that we were looking for a needle in a haystack or anything. We don't know what it was, and so we were just observing that.
So it was
Um,
the question was framed in a way where regardless of what you found, it was going to be cool.
exactly, like we don't know what it is, right?
Nice.
That's exactly what we're exploring. So that was kind of my master's research. My PhD kind of led off in a different way, and overall, the picture of what I did is called, well, no, I don't know if it's called, but the overall picture of my PhD is that I studied the synchronous Irish electric grid. Most electric grids in the world are synchronous. And I was studying its stability and about the possibility of introducing a stable energy storage source, such as vanadium flow batteries. So that's a beautiful one sentence to describe my PhD research, which it really isn't just one sentence when you go down
No,
to the.
dissect that for us, Dr. Tofu. Like, in the most rudimentary way, like, what is the problem that you're
Mhm.
facing?
Yeah.
What was the need for it, and then how did you go about answering this kind of
Yeah.
question?
Do we have time? I don't know how long. Like, everyone need to go to bed, or what's the story with everyone? Do we have time for this? Because, yeah, no, I have a plot. I have a plan of how to explain this, hopefully in a nice way to most people. And the reason is that most grids are synchronous grids, and I'll explain that in a second. But the reason that I want to highlight this is you'll hear in the news all the time that, oh, we can't introduce renewable energy because what will they usually say? They'll say, oh, because it's too expensive, or it's unstable, or it's not the right area to build things. They'll say all these kind of things, and in reality that's not true. Well, maybe there is a certain truth, but that's not the major problem. There's a bigger hill that we need to get over first. So to quickly explain, um classical way the electric grid operates is that you have these large generators that are operating connected synchronously to the grid. This means that a generator is spinning around in circles really fast. Steam heats up, it moves the generator moving really quickly. And in Ireland, we happen to operate at 50 hertz. To everyone in the United States, you guys are operating at 60 hertz. Doesn't matter, it's just a number. And yeah, these guys are all spinning. So let's say I always like to take the example of Ireland. It's an island, and let's say that we often need about 3,000 megawatts of power at any given moment. And we have 10 generators all producing 300 megawatts around Ireland. And they're all synced up to the grid. This means that, let's say, a disaster happens and one of the generators collapse. This means that your frequency is now for operating at 50 hertz, and it's about to drop. It's about to drop to 45. We're about to panic because this is where blackouts happen. And before this happens, there's a couple of things that are in place to protect it because we are a synchronous grid. Number one, the generator that has shut down has inertia, right? It's spinning, obviously, because of the steam, and suddenly the steam isn't there. It can't move anymore. It's not synced up, but it still has momentum. The big wheels are still spinning. That buys you a couple of really important seconds. The other important thing is the other 9 generators that are all over Ireland are now operating at 100%. Before, they were only operating at 95%, but they registered that one of the generators is down, so they up their game. They start operating
so
100.
you intentionally lower the percentage operating threshold
Exactly.
to account for if there's a loss.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they respond with that. There's also other stuff like open cycle gas generators that are specifically mini gas generators that are operating at 10% that will sync up immediately to respond and rev up to 100% to respond to this. But basically, this is the power of a synchronous grid. It means that if there's any fluctuations, if there's any losses, with the inertia and all the other electric grids, electric generators that are connected, there is a way to respond very quickly to this situation.
You said that when that first one shuts down, you have a couple of seconds, and those seconds are important. So
Absolutely.
I found that little statement to be really cool. Like, what makes those couple of seconds really important? Like, why is that buying you time? Is it just for the other generators to kick in?
And not even to kick in, to get the next generator up and running.
Gotcha.
So ideally, what you would do is your 11th generator is coming in, right?
Okay.
The spare generator.
And the spare
But
generator
that all takes time.
Until now is not even on.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you really do need to boost it. It takes so much time. And all of these, when we're talking about response time, this is something that I'll say, sometimes it's less than a second. Like, that is
Wow.
how fast response times need to be.
Wow.
Very, very difficult. Now, here's the problem. We're introducing renewable energy to the grid, which is great. I'm not an anti-renewable before anyone comes at me, I'm very, very pro-renewable. I'm just explaining the problem to anyone to make them understand. So now let's say we have 6 generators on the grid and we replace 4 of those generators with solar and wind. Great. Awesome. But those are not synchronous forms of energy. They're not generators. They're not heating up water to make steam to make a generator go. They're directly connected to the grid. If you want to kind of have a DC AC mind about it, that's kind of how it works. So now we're going to another story. Now one of the generators collapse. You now have only 5 generators that are integrated to the grid who are operating at 95%. Now it cannot respond quick enough with the power output that you need. This is a huge issue with the more that we integrate renewable energy with the grid, because if there is any huge downfall, any generator collapse, anything, we don't actually have that ability to respond very, very quickly. And this is a whole field of physics and science to do it. There are little things that are in place. Oh, sorry.
No, so why is that inherent to renewable energy? Like, what is it about the renewable energy sources that makes it in a way that it's hard, or is it just like how it's integrated into the system?
So it's not a generator that's moving. So you might think wind turbines might be, but they're not synchronous. You can't force a wind turbine to operate at 50 hertz, for example. You know,
Gotcha.
you get whatever wind you get is what you get. It's actually interesting. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. Don't quote me on this. But the generation of the wind turbines is AC initially, converted to DC, which is then again converted to AC. Holy inefficient process to actually do it.
Gotcha.
And then solar panels are directly constructed with DC in mind as well. And yeah, wind turbines can kind of meet not meet the requirement, but try and buy you time to offset this by sometimes there are wind farms that will actually move the pitch of the blade so that they're not maximizing the power output. That means they're operating, let's say, at 80% efficiency. And so when there's a power outage or a power plant that collapses, they change the angle so that they are suddenly, boosting up the power, which is a great idea. But again, it takes time. I'm talking about several seconds here at least, and that is already very, very, very costly.
It's cool. It's
That
really cool. The time factor that you're highlighting
mm,
here is that, one might naively think that a few seconds is fine, but it seems like that is a big limiting factor in making this work
Absolutely.
successfully. That's a really, really,
Yeah.
yeah, I love the details, Tofu.
There are solutions in place that we have things called like synchronous condensers on the grid. I know that Ireland did get them in at one point, but they're weird. It's basically a thing that spins that you integrate with your grid, but you're feeding it power to spin so that if there is a power outage, like a generator collapses, the inertia of that spinning thing is then used to buy you a couple of seconds. But hopefully it's clicking in. This is completely wasteful. We are quite literally putting energy in things just for what ifs. Does that make sense? We're the blade of the wind turbine, for example, we could be harnessing 100% of the wind, but we're not because we're worried about the what if. We have these spinning condensers that we're literally putting power into to make them spin on the electric grid, just so that it has inertia for the what if.
That was
And
actually a
so
what
this,
if question in chat too. Of what if a second one goes down, like a second
yeah,
one of these power supplies, right? And this, how does that end up happening into it? So what's the solution then? How do we get rid of the what ifs?
if you have a second generator that's collapsed, ladies and gentlemen, that is what classically is called a blackout. So if you are in a city or an area that experiences this is a problem. That is the ultimate consequence. Does happen, or if you don't respond correctly,
There we
or
go.
if we can't respond. So yeah, maybe some people experience blackouts. I live in an area where I don't. Very, very lucky, but generally Ireland is pretty good.
We've gotten
Um,
folks in California, so presumably, unfortunately, our California friends have gotten through those blackouts, and so that's the second generator going down. Yeah.
the other joke that I always like, I'm so sorry to make fun of America. I'll tread lightly here, but because I studied a bit more about the electric grid, um, I really like how the electric grid is separated in the United States. There's the East, there's the West, and there's Texas. And for some reason, whatever way it works, I don't know what the politics exactly is behind it all. But Texas is completely isolated. From what I understand as well, is that Texas does have a lot of power outages, and there's a whole other spiel of problems there. That was another tangent. Going back again. Anyways, so all of these problems with the electric grid that I've described is universal across the world. This
Okay.
is a thing. And it doesn't even matter if it's renewable, it's just introducing any other form of energy that isn't a generator that is synchronous to the grid. Anything that is not a generator, usually powered by steam, anything that doesn't spin is going to be a problem. And what we need to do is find ways to respond to the grid very, very quickly. And that's where my research went into vanadium flow batteries. Vanadium flow batteries, one of its selling points is that it can respond to the electric grid very, very quickly. So that's part one of my PhD. Explained a
So,
little bit.
so how? Yeah, I guess how does this happen? How does the electric grid? How does it respond quickly? Where is it built in? What is unique about this battery? Can I use it to charge my phone? What else can I do to make something like
Okay.
this work?
Okay, so I guess I'll explain very quickly. No, you can't use the vanadium flow battery to charge your phone. A vanadium flow battery is not a lithium ion battery. It is not a super energy condensed battery, which means that it's not small. It's very, very, very large, very, very, very big. And because it's very, very big, we can't drive around it, or we can't move it around or anything like that. But what's really useful about it is that you can scale it up to whatever size you want, which makes it perfect for electric grid integration. So if it's okay to explain what vanadium flow battery is.
Please.
So a vanadium is an element. It comes in a crystal blue powder form. Let me check 2 seconds. Haha! And we dilute it into electrolyte using H2SO4 and water. It comes in this beautiful, brilliant blue color. It's very, very shiny. I took a little bit of souvenir from the lab
So
after
that
I
is not
graduated.
like a GNC order. That is not like ordered from anywhere. That is a very
No, no.
okay.
It's very, very dilute, so it's very, very safe. I was allowed to take it as a little souvenir for myself.
What are there any safety concerns with this particular element?
No, no, vanadium itself is safe. What's their names? Bodybuilders take it as a thing to bodybuild.
Okay,
I
so
don't
it
know.
might be a GNC.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure. I have no idea.
Oh, in
I'm
the
not familiar
US,
with
that's
it.
like a dietary supplement drug company.
Oh, oh, okay. I don't know if it exists on its own. Maybe it's added. I'm not sure. Again, it's the other thing that's used in steel. So do you know iron is usually mixed with something? Vanadium is the thing sometimes that's used in the mixture as well.
Nice.
So it's not a dangerous element in that case. The thing that makes it dangerous, or why people flag it, is because of the acid that's in it. So it's H2SO4, sulfuric acid. Same thing that's in your car battery. If you have a lead acid car battery in your car, it's the exact same concentration as well, 4.5 molar. So it's not much more dangerous than that.
Right. So don't drink it.
No, yeah, don't drink it, of course, of course. Now, so what's really, really cool about vanadium, and this is the selling point, is that vanadium exists in 4 oxidation states. And I actually prepared for this talk ahead of time. If you will bear with me, I have a really cool thing to show you. If everyone is okay with this.
Please.
I have a really cool whiteboard. Yeah. With all of these stuff. Now, make sure that you guys get to see it. Hopefully you guys can see some of it above my head.
Looks perfect.
Is it visible?
Yep.
Nice. Okay. So this is a very simple structure of a vanadium flow battery. And we have a membrane in the middle, which is usually most batteries have half cells, which means one of it's split in half with something on one side and something on the other for every negative positive reaction. On the positive side, we have 2 oxidation states, vanadium 4 and vanadium 5. I showed you vanadium 4, it's blue. Vanadium 5, its different oxidation state, exists in a brilliant red color. Vanadium 2 and vanadium 3 are on the negative side of the cell. Vanadium 2 is purple, it's really, really bright purple, and vanadium 3 is green. It's actually insane how colorful vanadium is in these oxidation states. It's incredible, which is very important for spectroscopic analysis, which is a very, very important field of research in it. And so when the battery is discharged, it's in vanadium 4 and vanadium 3 oxidation state. We charge up the battery, vanadium 5, vanadium 2. It becomes discharged, vanadium 4, vanadium 3. And that is the charge-discharge cycle. And where the word vanadium flow battery comes in is that you actually have 2 giant pumps then on either side that are continuously pumping this electrolyte. So let's say you needed to store something like, I don't know, 200 megajoules of energy or something like that. I'm just making numbers off the top of my head. All you have to do is add more electrolyte to your station or to your area of energy storage. So you could customize it to what exactly you need for your electric grid.
And how is that going to differ per different electric grid? Like, how do you infer what the customization needs to be?
Oh, it depends on every little island and every country. So I know Japan does a lot of these. Japan has loads of vanadium flow battery actually, because they have little islands. So they have their mini grids on their little islands, and then they have big interconnection with the mainlands, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But then you have something like China. China's built the largest vanadium flow battery infrastructure 2 years ago, I think. It was quite new. It was absolutely massive. And they just needed to literally store excess energy. And so what you're using these giant vanadium flow batteries, ideally what you would use them for is that, remember I said that you have all the inertia, all the different response times to buy you time. A vanadium flow battery can respond very, very quickly. It's one of the quicker forms of batteries to be able to respond to this and to provide a stable power. But it can only provide power in the most ideal situation. I think that the most giant, amazing vanadium flow battery plant that you could have could buy you 20 minutes.
Okay.
The idea is this isn't like oxygen not included or one of those games where it's a way of storing massive amounts of energy. All it really is doing is buying you time so that you can efficiently respond to the grid, as in add a new power source, let's say a wind farm or another, solar array, or anything like that. The battery systems in most countries, in any countries or islands around the world, aren't there to store huge amounts of energy. All they're really designed to do is buy you that valuable time that I spent so much time talking about initially.
So that is to kick back on
Exactly.
everything else. And
Exactly.
what is the likelihood of being able to start up the others? Like how easy is it to fix it back in, or is it just you're buying that couple of seconds that you needed, you're expanding that to the order of 20 minutes or more? Like functionally, it's just a stopgap. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically, yes, it's that jump. So there's different kind of, there's a scale of time of, how would I say? There's the first few microseconds or so, the first then less than a second panic that you need to deal with. Then there's the next 4 seconds that you need to deal with, 4 or 5 seconds, and then finally you have this big 20-minute slot to get, because it depends. Again, I'm describing this in a very simple way, but in reality, the synchronous grid is very complicated. Because sure, when I was talking about Ireland and I was talking about 10 different generators, we know that if one generator goes down, it's 300 megawatts. But there are wind farms that are operating at 50 megawatts. There are solar panels that are operating at 10 megawatts. You don't know which one is going to go down, which one is going to go up, and how large it's going to be. So you don't even know what to prepare for perfectly, ideally.
And does the vanadium battery allow you to have that buffer to be able
Yeah,
to know what
exactly.
exactly is it working on? Like in a way that it can help. I guess that's the question.
Ariane underscore
And the idea
Celestine
behind it
just
is that you're
subscribed for
using
12
free energy. Okay,
months.
before anyone
Ooh.
comes at me, I'm a thermodynamics person, so I know there's no such thing as free energy. But what I mean when I say that it uses free energy is that it's energy that's being wasted anyway. So sometimes wind is blowing a little bit extra windy that day. Sometimes we get a little bit of extra sun. That never happens in Ireland, by the way. But on one occasion or two in the last 2 years, we might have had a bit of extra sun. And so when you have this excess, that's when you can use it to store the energy. It's so you're never actually wasting. Remember, I said that was a big problem with the wind turbines, that you're purposely operating them at 80%.
Mhm.
You're purposely operating all of these renewable forms of energy at lower percentages to be ready to compensate for the stability of the grid. And so if you do this way, you're not being wasteful.
That's a really cool way of taking it. A question from Chad is, what is
Yes.
the purpose of the different isotopes?
Oh, the different oxidation states of vanadium.
Yes.
It's the reaction electrochemically that happens. The purpose of it is the way it's an electrochemical form of energy storage. So on the positive side, if vanadium 4 goes to vanadium 5, it's a higher energy state. It stores electrochemical energy as vanadium 5. So when you bring it down to vanadium 4, you're getting energy back out of it. We'd have to do a whole electrochemistry lesson if we wanted proper answers there.
Is there any byproduct to using a vanadium battery? Like, what is the end result, right? You know, some batteries aren't recyclable. You have to dispose of them in
Mm,
particular ways. Like there might be leaching into the soil, right? There's like some
yeah.
negative consequence of it. But with the vanadium batteries, is there anything?
Yeah, no, that's one of the biggest selling points of vanadium. Like we cannot compete, or well, not bro, not we can't compete, but I'm not competing against lithium ion batteries. I'm not coming after anyone. But my point is, vanadium flow batteries cannot compete with um, lithium ion because they're hugely energy dense. They're so energy dense, they have the energy density of a live grenade. They're very, very energy dense. And there are there's whole discussions and spiels about the dangers of it. Because vanadium flow battery number one isn't that energy dense, it is so much safer. It's also very, very much based on the practice of lead acid batteries. And lead acid batteries have been around for a very, very long time. It's one of the older form of batteries that we know. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, it is the first recyclable battery that ever existed. And so we know the recycling process of lead acid batteries, and very similar, we know vanadium. Now, how we get vanadium is via mining. And you don't actually mine for vanadium. You just accidentally find vanadium when you're actually mining for useful stuff, if that makes sense. So it's
Yeah.
just a byproduct of mining. So obviously there are the usual worries and problems with any sort of mining that does happen, but it's
So
not something that you're going out of your way for
so
already.
what else is vanadium used for anything else?
Just like I said, the bodybuilders take it as supplements and it's used in steel. It's
Mhm.
the addition to steel.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of anything else.
Is it common enough where it's because you were saying you don't have to go looking for it? So is it just
Mm,
you just happen to be digging for something else? Like, oh, we got some, we can sell it on, and that's good. Like, there's enough of it around.
mm. Um, I want to say there is enough around it because not many people are using it yet. Now, if I say this and I don't know, become the president of some country and I suddenly promote vanadium flow batteries and everyone wants it, there won't be enough. Absolutely.
Gotcha.
At the moment, the countries that do have mining access to vanadium are probably a lot more advantageous. I know that that's why China was able to build the biggest one they had access to. I know that we got vanadium from Japan, so Japan has access to it, and I think Canada and Russia are the other two countries also who do have access. So it would definitely benefit those nations if they were looking for new forms of energy storage and things like that. I'm a really big advocate for not narrowing down narrowing down to one single form of energy, number one, storage or energy production. In terms of stability, financial stability, and also to a certain degree, grid stability, I am a big advocate for diversifying energy storages and energy sources. As we know, with all the wars that can be happening and are happening, as soon as conflicts between nations arise, suddenly you can come out with serious shortages in certain powers. And to keep your nation stable and powered efficiently, and all the good stuff, I'm a big advocate for that. Exactly.
So that's a follow-up question from chat is when there's, wind, solar, hydro,
Mhm.
all these other types of powers, is there something that's better overall? Or is it just, again, grid dependent, system dependent, and maybe a mix of everything would be the best thing to do?
Oh, I didn't I said that all renewable is a DC, which is bad in terms of stability for the grid. But there is something that is good, and is good for stability. Dams, hydro power plants.
Okay.
They're very, because it's, even though it's not steam, technically,
The water's
it
still
is.
flowing and turning.
Exactly, turning a turbine, exactly. Obviously you've problems like floodings and droughts and all of that, but generally speaking, that is a really cool form. Honestly, capitalizing on your nation, your geographical ability to harness natural powers is probably the best description or advice I can give. In Ireland, we have wind. Hell, we've a lot of it. So I'm a big advocate for capitalizing on that. And then, Iceland has the amazing access to geothermal, which is great as well. So yeah, so
So
I'm a big advocate for that for sure.
depending on the locale you're in, that's what you would adapt to how to best able to fix things and be able to figure out what to actually do, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Nice. Makes total sense. So okay, so you're working on this battery,
Yeah.
right? It's a vanadium battery to be able to pick up the temporal difference to make 20 minutes. What does that PhD look like?
Oh yeah, my picture then is a bit more boring. So, ultimately, two of the chapters were focused on the thermodynamic potential of all the vanadium oxidation species. That doesn't sound very, very fun, but no one had done it, so it was actually really, really cool. I was able to build two different experiments and compare and contrast them, and basically simulate a more ideal battery. Wasn't able to test it just because of time. I was already doing my PhD for 4.5 years. My funding rang out. I had to write a thesis. But there's definitely a lot of continuation work behind it. Then the grid stuff was mostly simulation, integrating a battery with the Irish electric grid. I got data from EirGrid, which is our operating electric grid entity. I'm not sure what their name is exactly. But yeah, I contacted them. I was like, look, I'm doing a PhD thesis. Could you give me frequency data? Which I didn't realize how much data it was, but every second of the grid was monitored every single second. So there was a data for every single second of Ireland in 2019 and 2020. And I had to analyze that frequency data to simulate the whole spiel that I was working
So,
on.
what does the simulation entail, like, and how difficult it is to go from something that you can test to that
Mm,
simulation? Like, because we, a lot in like bioinformatics, it's like, well, it's almost like garbage data in, garbage data out in terms of what you have to
yeah.
simulate with. How do you know what is good data when you're doing the simulation? How do you know the simulation has been a worthwhile output?
Okay, I see. Okay, so the conditions of my simulation were I'm going to introduce a new concept. We've talked about the electric grid and stability. There was a lot of things I said. So, going back to it, a thing happens on your electric grid. We call them events. So, what is an event? An event is where, remember, I said the electric grid in Ireland operates at 50 hertz. In United States, it's 60 hertz. If your grid starts to rise a little bit too high, or if it starts to drop a little bit too low, that is defined as an event. It means that there is a moment of destabilization in the grid and you have to respond to it accordingly. If it arises above 50 hertz, it means you need to integrate an energy storage. You have too much power on the grid. So, this is where the excess energy storage comes in for battery storage that I described. And that's what I would simulate. Would the battery be able to sustain itself by consuming this excess power of these events? And vice versa, an event where it begins to drop under 40 hertz, you need to feed power back into the grid. And would the battery be able to sustain and respond to those events? And there was different definitions for events, what kind of percentage or what kind of parameter. You can imagine that the electric grid is very, very sensitive. And so let's say you defined, turn the battery on when we reach 50.01 hertz, but it'll be playing with that 50.01 hertz like a fiddle, like it'll be
Mhm.
up and down, up and down. And you can't have a battery shutting up and
Right.
shutting on and off all the time. So there's all these different scenarios and conditions that I had to simulate, and that was mostly what I did with that work to publish and to show all the kind of conditions to make a battery, a vanadium flow battery work. And ultimately, what's really cool about the work that I did is that it doesn't even matter if it's a vanadium flow battery. It's just a battery, a form of energy storage that
Mhm.
could be integrated with the grid.
For those wondering, we are joined today by Dr. TinyToxicTofu. She is a partner here on Twitch. You can hit that heart button at the top of the chat if you've not already. She does science chat on Twitch. She does games and the physics behind games. She is a real life physics professor. Please, y'all, go drop her a follow and show science some love. That is Dr. TinyToxicTofu. Um, Dr. Tofu, how does something like this look physically? These vanadium batteries in a plant, like what am I envisioning
Oh,
here?
two huge giant tanks. One with the negative side of the electrolyte, one with the positive side of the electrolyte, and basically two giant plates where the carbon electrodes can be immersed into the electrolyte to do all the bzzz stuff,
So the
the, ma-
drawing
the
that you
magic
had
bzzz stuff.
behind us, but with two giant tanks.
Exactly, exactly. So I don't know if you've seen lithium ion battery energy storage facilities. They're like literally rectangular plates stacked and in these big giant containers which are also stacked. In this case it's just one infrastructure, one building with a giant tank.
Cool. And what are the safety features for something like this? Is it as much as it is for, like, let's say, nuclear power, or is it as little as it might be for I don't know, like a water supply?
Yeah, not as little as with water supply there's a lot of danger mechanically, like you're working with a lot of heavy duty material, which is there is its own safety. But in terms of, it's nowhere near as nuclear, it's way safer than lithium. I would describe it as the battery being very similar. Imagine that it's just a giant car battery.
Mhm.
It's not that different than the giant car batteries that you have inside your car. Again, it depends what car you have. I'm talking about classical, you know, if you turned on the lights, your parents would scream at you kind of car. That kind of car.
Nice. Yeah, and the question was too, like, how big is this tank that we're talking about? Like, is this something like a football field size, a car size?
That's the most. I always make a joke about this when I see imperial units being used, and instead of converting to them to SI, it's like, oh, it's 2/3 of a football field or 10
Yeah,
chihuahuas instead of why? Ah. No, I actually, I've never seen a real live giant infrastructure because we don't actually have a vanadium flow battery infrastructure here in Ireland. In case I kind of gave the impression, we have built the first electrical energy storage here in Ireland in the center of Ireland. It is lithium ion in collaboration with a Korean team, but again, I've never been at a large actual vanadium flow battery infrastructure. I think if you are interested in looking it up, if anyone in chat is very interested, Dalian, China, that's the one that has built the biggest vanadium flow battery in the last 2 years. Absolutely incredible work, and they've doubled it in size recently, which is really incredible. So if you're looking to see it, and just to kind of jump on the question of saying, is it still experimental? It is. What's that word where it is integrated in real life with grids, or like it's it's definitely already installed with electric grids around the world, in Germany, in China, in Japan, but they're not mass commercial.
Gotcha. So
I
it's
don't
like
know if
it's
there's a
like
word.
it's in like a flavor of testing phase. Is that fair?
Yes, so it's definitely already past test. Like, I think you can even buy vanadium flow batteries commercially. There are websites in the United States anyway. They're kind of advertised, I think, in New York, if I'm not mistaken, in the basements. They're considered very, very safe because they can't explode.
Fair. Fair. I was just gonna be like, wait, what do you use them for? Okay, that's also a need that it's like in that different zonal thing. So
Mm,
it goes to show, right, the importance of doing the theoretical work. Like, you don't need to have that real life machine next door to you. The importance of the theoretical side of things to inform what the real life might be doing.
mm.
We had one question in the chat of, can you tie the technical and the engineering side of things? Like, could you describe to folks why that's also like one of these like more hard sciences? Like, it's like in the same vein as the biological and the chemistry side of things. Of like, I feel like some of it, as people are saying, it's a little bit abstract. And so it's like, how do we make it so that how can we explain to folks that it is a real life, like really heavy hitting science, if that makes sense?
Mm. As in that what I do is science? Is that what the question is?
As in like it's easier to as it's as easy to make like direct impact as something in the like working with cell lines. Like, here I'm working with cells in a dish that has an immediate impact on people. You're working with these batteries that has an immediate
Oh
impact as
yeah.
well.
Yeah. So I suppose I still have the unfortunate disconnect that I'm not working with a company, and I am not working with an actual commercialized electric grid to do it. The research that I do in the lab is very fundamental. Like I said, in the end, what I did was I measured doing two very interesting experiments. I measured the thermodynamic potentials of all of these four vanadium species, and no one in the commercial realm or engineering realm would do that. That's a very that's a very I don't in chemistry. Do you know the way you measure the chemical thermodynamic potential of all the species of anything,
Mhm.
H2SO4, HCl, any existing chemical out in the world, you would measure. For some reason, the different oxidation states of vanadium weren't done, and that's why I went off and did what I did, which was, I suppose, as raw science as it gets. It might not be fun in terms, it doesn't look that glamorous. It wasn't revolutionary, but it is a very defined parameter.
So similar to in
Um,
the biological side of things, where you're trying to identify how exactly things work on a fundamental level, and then it'll be
exactly.
informative later on. But this is work that needs to, like, the very basic work for a whole understanding of how the system works.
Mm, exactly.
In the last few minutes of the front page, Tofu, and we'd like to keep you on a little bit longer if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Could you, like, as we're on the front page of Twitch, could you tell folks what it means to you to be a woman in STEM?
Absolutely. I'm actually a bit sad that I'm the first guest of your series because, as you guys know, Science is doing this wonderful series of inviting many women from different STEM backgrounds and fields, which is absolutely fantastic. But the reason I'm a bit sad going first is that I did want to talk about this, but I really mostly wanted to talk about how amazing my experience has been and how I have been so lucky in my life that I am coming off from the shoulders of giants before me. And what I mean by that is, as I did my master's and my PhD, there was no obstacles in my way to stop me from getting my master's and my PhD and becoming the physics lecturer that I am now. I did not experience sexism or nasty commentary or any, degrading aspects that are usually associated in this area. I also was able to have women to look up to in my own field. I had women in physics that I was looking up to. I had women who were doing PhDs alongside me through my path. And so what I wanted to highlight, it's not to negate the difficulties that women are going through, because that's very important to point out, but rather to show that progress is being made, that I am standing on the shoulders of giants. I am standing on this ground where so many women have paved the way ahead for me, and I got to have this really privileged and amazing experience being a woman in STEM. Just a little kind of like side rant on the topic, which I wanted to be like a guest in the middle to kind of cheer up people a little bit that there is some progress being made. But you know what? If it's to start it off as well this way,
You know what? I think that's an
I'd love that.
inspiring way to kick off the whole series of like there is and has been progress. Yes, there's work to do,
Mm.
but it's really refreshing to hear that someone did have a good experience. And I think that could be very inspiring for the next generation of women in science who are listening to this show, whether either live or later on, and seeing like this extremely successful PhD in physics, Twitch partner, hopefully soon to be Twitch ambassador, is telling us about the science that she works on and being able to feel supported in the field, and it's not all just a battle.
Oh yeah, no, it is really amazing, and I wanted to highlight again just to say that obviously improvements can be made, and what I experienced was definitely a privileged experience, and it's not majority, unfortunately, but I'm very very lucky, absolutely.
Do you have any broad advice for women trying to get into the field of STEM? What, like, any guiding words that you feel might help or would have helped you had you known?
Uh, oh, geez, that's hard. Okay. Oh, you put me on the spot. I
We
need
can
some
we can we can
inspirational.
we can
Oh, I
pass. We
need
can pass for a little bit later.
I need Spock, some famous line from Star Trek or something good here. Janeway, Janeway. There's coffee in that nebula. No, that's the wrong quote. Damn it. But honestly, doing what you love is, I know it's cheesy. I know it's overused. Everyone says it. Everyone does it. But my life has been really, really fortunate, really lucky, really amazing. I have been describing it lately that I am having such an amazing life with Twitch, with my job, with everything that I do in STEM, because I love what I do. I love to learn. It's definitely something very primitive in me that no matter how fundamental the physics is, even if it's first year physics, stuff that me and you guys can learn right now in the next 15, 20 minutes, I love to always either revise, to learn, or to apply a new twist to what I'm learning. And if you have that passion, it doesn't even matter if it's STEM, to be fair, it could be anything. I absolutely advise you to pursue it. And I know it's very sad to say that because sometimes dreams aren't applicable directly to job and employability. But whatever it is you do, maybe you can get the closest thing to it. Or something that you can do as a hobby that you absolutely love and appreciate. That's my advice there.
That's absolutely beautiful. Can we keep you for a little bit longer?
I have booked you in for the next while.
Awesome. Perfect. Guys, again, if you're not following Tiny Toxic Tofu, for those coming in on the front page, we've got a custom command that's also pinned to the top of the chat. There is her Twitch page and her YouTube page. Yes, she does science YouTube as well. She does all the things. Please go follow our dear friend Tiny Toxic Tofu. She also has science tech talks where she pulls on guests. She dissects the science behind video games. She
Right.
does it all, folks. She does it all. So please go drop her that follow. An incredible beacon of women in science, and I'm so glad that she was the first to kick us off on this whole series, and for just agreeing to join us as well on this series. Thank you so much, Dr. Tofu. I'm just, I was so nervous. I was like, oh, I'm not worthy to have her on.
Oh, stop. I was nervous. There's a few mods in my own members of the community in the chat at the moment, and I was like writing them a message saying I am absolutely mortified because I invite Twitch streamers on my show. So I'm always telling them, no, this is casual. Don't be nervous. Everything's fine. And this is my first time being interviewed on Twitch. And I was like, heck, how do y'all come to Tofu Tech Talk and not be nervous as hell? Because I'm sweating buckets.
Y'all, I may have not told her. I've forgotten to tell her to not to worry. I assumed it was implied, but that we would make sure everything would be taken care of. But no, seriously, thank you. This story is absolutely inspirational, and we love having you here. So after you got your degree, Dr. Tofu, what was the
Yeah.
next step for you? Like you're now a fancy educator in physics, but what was presumably there was some unknown, and then how did you go about making the decision of where you are today?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. This has all happened in the last year almost. My journey of me completing my PhD to where I am now is actually so incredible. And members of the community who are talking at the moment is just they supported me every step of the way, and they were there throughout the whole hectic adventure. So after submitting my PhD in my defense, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Obviously, the most classical route is doing a postdoc, and I saw what the work conditions of postdocs are. It's not good. I'm very, very angry about the kind of system that's in place for postdocs, that, you have to have this ridiculously high qualification,
Ultrasaurus
that you
just
sacrifice
subscribed
so
for
many
6
of your
months.
formative years. Like, you're sacrificing all of your 20s. That's if you did everything in order, by the way. Like, if you didn't even take any breaks, you're sacrificing all of your 20s for this. And then once you're done, you are going into quite a low paid job, number one. Number two, absolutely no financial stability, in the sense that it's a contract, which means, let's say, oh, 5 years down the road, I want to buy a house, I want to have a family. You can't even take a loan out because you don't have a stable income. Anyways, I could talk all the time about postdoc. I really think that there needs to be a fix to the system,
So
in my opinion.
is the postdoc then sounds very similar in physics as it does in the biological sciences.
I think it's yeah, I think it's similar across most Western academia anyway.
So it's still like
Of
after your
what I've spoken.
PhD, you go in, it's like your second, almost your second round of training that what you will lab will eventually become. And you might get paid a little bit more than a graduate student, but it's still like the expectation of 80 hours a week for a 40-hour a week salary kind of deal that's not necessarily enough to survive off of, right?
Yeah. It's there's a lot of negativity with it associated, and I really was upset. And I decided, you know what, I'm putting my foot down, and I'm not doing that. I thought it was just something that would break my soul.
Mhm.
So I was lost, and I decided, you know what? I don't have a job. I have nowhere to go. I had an incredible had. I still have him. Nate, my incredible partner, is still here. Absolutely amazing, supportive, and I just kind of gave him this idea. I was like, look, my weird Feynman video on Instagram blew up, and I stream on Twitch. I've nothing else to do. Let's gamble and give full time streaming a go. And at the beginning of 2024, I did that. Absolutely huge success on Instagram, absolutely huge success on Twitch. I was able to get partner a year ago. And yeah, it was just such an incredible adventure that Nate, first of all, supported me. Absolutely incredible partner in that sense. Got me, supported me financially to get to where I am today. Then what happened after getting partner? I although I loved physics, doing physics on Twitch, and I loved Instagram, I love teaching. It was actually Twitch that taught me that I love teaching. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I do feel like I am a good teacher. It's something. If there's anything I pride myself in academia, it's the teaching. Maybe not the science as much as others, but I feel like I am a very good teacher. And I chanced my arm. I applied for a coincidental job opening around the area that I was living in, a lecturer position in physics, chanced my arm, and I couldn't believe I got it. And I think actually the social media, by the way, maybe people aren't ready to hear this, but the whole social media thing that I did, all the science communication that I did, probably helped me a lot in my CV application in the process.
It was almost like, I guess, personal branding, right? Like, this is the branding of who I am and how I educate.
Oh, apologies. Someone said chanced my arm. That's a very, I didn't realize, but that's actually a very Irish figure of speech. Yeah, chancing your arm is a slang we say to gamble, to take a chance.
And so, what is your teaching methodology, Dr. Tofu? Like, what do you think that has led to that success in terms of, like, because I've watched. Listen, I did horrible in physics. I could do everything else, but physics, it just didn't click. But when I watch
Mm.
you talk about things, I find it easier to connect with. I find it's in
Mm.
like a digestible way, and I can't quite pinpoint it because physics just doesn't come easy to me. But you make it accessible and dissectable by explaining in a bunch of different varieties. What do you think set you up to be able to
Oh,
explain things in that way? And what advice do you have to people who would like to get into
become
educating?
teachers.
Yeah, either whether
Mm.
in the research center, like a school, or on Twitch.
Mm.
Like what made
Yeah.
it possible for you to find this success in your teaching?
That is a very good question. It's kind of tooting my own horn here now. I have to compliment myself now.
Yes, yes, you do.
Yeah, one of the things that are in my lectures, I'm down with the kids. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, very worth. But I am very similar age to a lot of the students that I'm teaching in the university. Like I post memes, and I have TV and movie references that only, again, I'm not coming after the boomers or anyone of older age, but that they most people wouldn't get, and Gen Z and millennial would be able to understand those jokes and those memes. So I definitely do that a lot. But the other aspect of it, and probably most important via Twitch and via my lecturing, is that I wasn't very bright when I was studying physics. I did the maths. Remember, I said I was good at maths.
Hmm.
I conceptually didn't understand a lot.
Okay.
That's the really thing. And it's a big advice I give a lot of people with thermodynamics and statistical physics, which gets a bit more complicated, is never to dissociate from the mathematics and the physics, because the maths gets complicated, but you need to keep track of what's actually happening. And because I wasn't very good conceptually when I was growing up through college degree and all of that, going back over it now, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I wish this was explained this way. Oh, that makes sense. I wish I had learned it this way. And I keep a track in my head because these stories, these analogies, whether it be history, whether it be a derivation and a really bad trick that mathematicians don't use, but physicists do, or again, history is something I mentioned earlier. I love talking about the history of why something was developed. Whatever way it got clicked in my head, I now share the clickability that I had in that I experienced. Basically, it's kind of like, what's that term? Do you know the way we criticize our parents for raising us? They did the best that they could with what they had,
Yeah.
but we do criticize them and reflect on the parenting. And so when we have kids, and how you have your little munchkin, maybe perhaps in your brain you're like, I'm not going to do what my parents did, or the opposite, what they did do good, I will do that, you know? It's the same way with teaching for me. I just reflect on what I experienced, what I was confused about, and do the same. And luckily, I was very confused. So
So
there's a lot to talk about and a lot to share.
there's multiple different ways of learning something, and it's not just like one correct way. I know that's what was pushed down our throats all the time, was like, oh, this is the way that you learn and that's it. And then it's like, well,
Mm,
but what about these other different ways that I'd be able to learn, right? I feel like that makes it more accessible. So
absolutely.
is that the advice that you would give to anyone who is wanting to get into teaching, either on Twitch
Exactly.
or just like in a classroom?
Exactly. Describe it in the way that it works in your brain. And chances are, even though we're all very individual and unique humans, we also seem to all be living life the same as well to a certain degree. There's going to be someone who understands it the way you explained it. And you will find your people that way as well, which is kind of nice. Whether it be in the classroom, as a teacher, you'll have the students who associate and cater for you. And it was kind of mentioned earlier as well. I suppose a thing that I should highlight, um, to give credit where it's due as well, is that I do actually have a bachelor's in pedagogy. I do actually have an education degree as well. So this whole system of reflecting on my learning is ingrained in me as well from my years of studying as well.
Did you find, was that critical to get that degree in pedagogy, or do you feel like you've been lucky enough where, you would have done well either way? It's just maybe enhanced a little bit of what you've seen.
No, I think that pedagogy really helped me. It helped me with my public speaking. I was terribly shy, so it definitely helped me a lot. I did need that. What else did it help me with? Help me be a good Twitch streamer and vice versa. Like, people say Twitch streaming is easy. You sit down and you turn on the mic, but it's a skill you learn to be able to communicate with your community, to whether it is whatever you do, science community, playing games, chatting. There is definitely a skill associated with doing what you do, keeping track of chat and talking to chat, and not going on too many tangents. I have still to perfect that. We're 6 years going. One day.
I feel like we should go on more tangents, if nothing else. But no, you're right. It is a skill, right? It is not as easy as turning on the microphone. And it is something where when you're doing like the breakdown of the physics, that's not just you sitting down at your computer and turning on the mic and be like, I'm just going to randomly talk about some physics. Like you've done research into the various things that you're going to highlight, right? And so it's not just a 5-minute prep ahead of time. It's 10 years worth of research experience with your master's and your PhD, and then the looking up ahead of time. Like there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into like that. Was that a fair assessment, do you feel?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, kind of to highlight and mention, I already mentioned how I test my education on Twitch stream, and then I make a reel it and an Instagram, and then I have stories to tell in my lecturing. A lot of people say, how do you do like basically 2 mini jobs and then 1 main job all the time? But the beauty of it is that they're all interconnected. In a weird way, a lot of the prep work is the prep work for the other, which is the preliminary thought process for the next. And my Twitch streaming skills have applied to my teaching, which have applied to my Twitch streaming. And it's all a wonderful cycle in that way. There's a few people talking about rabbit holes and lab rat holes in the chat, and randomly am advertising that now that we were mentioning rabbit holes, that I am adopting as of tomorrow a rescue bunny, so we will be calling them rabbit holes from here on in.
And yeah, why is the tofu community named as the lab rats?
How did it happen? It was as most things. If you this is a general advice for Twitch streaming: don't force a shtick on your stream, or don't force a what's the word I'm looking for? Remember, I told you I would forget words. Don't form an ethos or an aura. Don't have something in mind. Let it grow organically and naturally. The lab rat thing just happened completely random. I think maybe I was sacrificing them for Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough. I was literally rolling the dice for a nat 20, I think. Maybe before that. Yeah. And it's just become a meme, a meme within a meme, lore of the channel that developed over time.
Embrace the channel lore for sure. We embrace the channel lore here on like an ant in a carrot outfit taking a nap, because that is apparent that is loreful, and that has become something we gotta pay attention to. And then why the name Tiny Toxic Tofu?
Okay, so nowadays I tell everyone, it's because I worked with vanadium batteries and they're in H2SO4 and they're toxic. Tiny because I'm slightly on the shorter side, and tofu because it was a pet name given. Listen, the real reason comes back to Heroes of the Storm. And I told you that MOBAs are a very toxic community playing games. Okay, listen. I was not toxic. I was not mean. I didn't death threat anyone. I didn't do anything like that. But I was very competitive. So that's the true origin of toxic. But now I tell them it's because I work with dangerous chemicals. So
I,
there you
I
go.
like the OG lore and I like the new lore too. I think both are very nice quality.
Mm,
So
mm.
what's the next step in the journey of Dr. Tofu? What is the next goal? What are you working towards? What is your vision for topology to become?
Oh, well, one cool thing is that I'm going to TwitchCon for the first time ever. I'm really excited. Never been to one.
Is that
So that's my short-term goal.
UK, US, both?
It's the Europe one, and it's going to be in Rotterdam in Netherlands.
Okay,
So never been to Netherlands. It's in
nice.
an awkward time when we have exam paper submission. So, but
Perfect timing.
yeah, yeah. As long as I'm available online to answer any questions, I think I should be fine. But yeah, that's like the immediate plans. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to meeting so many of my members of community and friends that I've known for years and I've never met because we're all over the world. So looking forward to that. That will be really fun. Long term, I'm really kind of a person who lives day by day. I've never had goals for myself. My PhD, like I said, is a series of unfortunate events. I didn't go into academia saying, I'm going to get a doctorate in physics. It was, I walked in accidentally into my supervisor's office and it was like, by the way, you got a really good grade. You know, you can easily apply for PhD funding. Let's do it. And, my whole life has been that way. I really don't plan for anything big. And even if there is a little goal in my head, I always downplay it because I don't want to break my heart if I don't achieve it. The other side of it is when I achieve things, they come out of the blue, and it almost feels like it falls in your lap when they do happen.
Is the goal, at least one goal then, is still to continue on the Twitch side of things and the science communication? It feels like almost at this
Yeah.
point that's just like an integral part of who you are. Do you feel like
Mm,
that is a viable and
mm.
likely thing to like to be continuing?
Absolutely. I think that I know that we're all going to be aging as a community, so I don't know what not trying to call anyone out old or anything like that, but you do have to wonder what kind of community I will have down the years down the line. Will it replenish? Will it renew? I've no idea. But if you're living day by day, it's okay. I have the Instagram as well, the social media that I do all the shorts as well, so that I have that as well. In some shape, way, or form, I would like to be some sort of outreach science communicator. That being said, I'm also going to be applying for a lot of research funding over the summer, even though I am in I think the American term is kind of tenure track, if that makes
Hmm.
sense, that I don't need to have research, which I'm very, very lucky. Really, really got lucky. Uh, but I don't want to be out of the loop in science and physics because this is not the case for everyone, but to be a good science communicator, in my case, I have to be a good scientist as well. I am not very good at doing science communication in areas that I don't understand or I'm just learning it. When I teach things that I do teach, it's something that I've gone over many, many times, not just in a series of days, it's years. Um, so for me to be a good science communicator, I need to also still be a scientist. And that's why I think I'd like to continue doing research as well. So that is a goal for sure as well.
What are you, if it you can't, I don't, probably not a singular thing, but what are you most interested in? Like, what is your ideal research question to study?
Oh, my ideal research. Okay, so I would love to be hired by anyone and everyone to build their experiments and design them. That would be my dream. So I wouldn't actually do anything experimentally, but people will come to me and be like, "Can we apply with this research funding? And we need to build A, B, and C." And I would be hired to build the A, B, and C. I'm also trying to start this project over summer where I'm going to build a few things around my house, and I'm going to build some experiments, very simple things, dual pendulums, but there's also cool things that you can make, which is like a cloud chamber, where we were able to discover the first positron and cosmic rays using it. And it's actually not that hard to build, but I'd love to be able to build that at home as well. Um, the field of science that I love the most is thermodynamics, but it is a very rare field to be able to do raw anything anymore. It's not outdated physics. I'm not trying to bully thermodynamics, but it is a very old form of physics in comparison to quantum and particles. So I
So
don't know if there's much research in that area.
is it in that some fields are more likely to get funding than others within physics? Like I know in biology, like a lot of yeast
Hmm.
research has kind of gone down in terms of funding, and now it's much more like non-model systems like rice instead of Arabidopsis because you can do genetic testing there. Like, are there almost like not necessarily arcane fields of physics, but more that you're going to use that field as a tool more so than an
Mm.
like a whole area of study?
Okay. I don't know actually. I guess I'm still kind of I'm fresh blood in in the field of looking for funding. Like I
Mhm.
just graduated a year ago, just to put it in perspective. So I haven't actually gone out and felt the trauma of being rejected over and over again for funding applications. So that's just all ahead of me this summer. So I'm so sorry. My answer is I don't know. And I'll find out.
What is as we're wrapping up, like what is the funding like that you would be going for? Is it like is it government specific? Is it foundations? Like what kind of funding agency do you propose to, and what is the approach to it? Like what is it similar kind of how we set up this discussion of there's a problem statement, here's how I'll propose to fix it, like a regular old grant, or how does one do this for physics?
Yeah, so there's loads of different funding opportunities in Ireland, usually government based, and even the ones that are government based, they're also directly linked with what's the word I'm looking for? They're directly linked with industry. So rather than going through industry, it's a government funded thing that you pair up with industry. And generally speaking, I do think that it is a good agency in the sense that things like it's not funded by the military. We don't have a military in Ireland. So little things like that you can kind of note at. And I wouldn't understand what the I wouldn't be able to express truthfully what the success rate is, but I would say that what the calls, I don't know if that's the same terminology that you use in the States, what the calls tend to be are about the issues that are circulating in Ireland. So the stuff that I look up, it's all about batteries right now. It's all about wind turbines, and it's all about electric grid and smart grid stability and all of that. So, in terms of me looking for funding, the buzzwords or the areas that are being funded and people are looking for research in is definitely fruitful, or there's a lot of opportunity there for me.
That sounds like it'll be a very exciting, although, like you said, possibly
Reject, yeah.
scary summer for coming your way.
uh, yeah,
Nice. So, I
exactly.
guess as we're rounding out Dr. Tofu, what would you like the party people to know? Any upcoming events? Like first of all, thank you for your time, for
Of
talking
course.
with us and going through your journey, for your insights in being a woman in STEM, for your successes, for letting us celebrate your successes, your future plans, and going through and dissecting, a long PhD, like 4 years worth of PhD work and your master's work, two in an hour and a half, which is not easy, and making it digestible too. I think that kind of highlights just how
Yeah,
incredible you
I
are.
hope the electric grid wasn't too difficult. I did really think about how to explain it as best as
I
possible.
thought it was beautiful. I followed it. I didn't do well in physics. I followed it perfectly. I love the whiteboard it used to. Um, but yeah, let us know what are you up to? What is upcoming?
Mm.
TwitchCon, you'll be there. Hopefully,
Yes.
maybe we can get her on a panel, y'all. That would be really cool.
Oh.
But what else? Like, what else is upcoming? Big events, little events, anything at all? The floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of if you guys want to catch me streaming, I usually stream on weekends only because I am working at the moment, full time. So I usually stream Friday, Saturday, Sundays. If you want to catch a really cool stream on Sunday next week, so not tomorrow, but next week Sunday, I'll be on the front page. I applied and I got the front page. I will be doing the physics of Marie Sklodowska-Curie, who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry and Physics and did all the radiation physics. I will be teaching um, radiation. I will be teaching gamma, alpha, beta. We're going to be talking about the particle decay, the whole spiel. We're going to talk about Half Life, and then I'll play Half Life, the original game. So if you're interested in any of that, absolutely check it out. And there was loads of people in the chat, by the way. Oh, perfect timing. Ultrasaurus just typed. There's so many amazing women that you lined up science for this channel. And obviously, I knew so many of them already, which was fantastic. Obviously, like Ultrasaurus, which we bonded over the weirdest thing, horses, not science, horses. But I made so many amazing colleagues, I would like to say, here on Twitch. And what was really cool is using your banner of the promotion of women in STEM. I also discovered people like Lana Lux, someone who I didn't know of. Absolutely discovered their channel. So freaking cool. So I don't know if you wanted or if you thought about this, but you're also connecting a lot of women of STEM together as well via this event that you've organized. So absolutely well done, number one. Number two, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'm so glad to be representing women in STEM, in physics. And yeah, I'm absolutely honored that, you thought of me, invited me, and gave me this wonderful opportunity.
Grateful to have you here. I'm grateful for your friendship, for you being my colleague here on this platform. And y'all, I cannot endorse Tiny Toxic Tofu highly enough. She is an incredible physicist, PhD in physics. She is the leading expert on physics as far as I'm concerned on this platform. So if you want to learn physics, batteries in an accessible, beautiful way, please join Tiny Toxic Tofu. That was our interview with Tiny Toxic Tofu. All of her socials are linked in the show notes. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.